day, friends of Buzzy. I am Dr. Amy Baxter. I am a pediatric emergency doctor, just taking a little hand sanitizer moment. And today we're going to talk about what I have actually devoted the last 15 odd years of my life to, which is improving the vaccination experience and improving vaccination. Before we get to that, since everybody's interested in coronavirus, I'm going to do a review of the top 4 potential vaccines that we can look at right now, and another vaccine which is relevant to coronavirus, and then a vaccine which is a totally different mechanism but also may help with coronavirus. After going through explaining where we are in the process with these, I'm going to talk about something that we've been hearing a lot about here, which is fear of getting the vaccine. So to jump right in there, the concept of a vaccine is that you are giving the body and the immune system a little tiny bit of what you're worried about catching to teach the immune system so that when the real thing shows up, your immune system says, no worries, I got this. I think one of the best metaphors for this is that you have a hunting dog, you give the dog something to sniff so that it knows what it's going for, and then when it smells that again, it's after it. So there are a couple different ways you can teach the body about a virus or a bacteria or anything else. So one thing is you can teach it to recognize a piece that's on the outside of it. And so in the case of coronavirus, we have a spike protein that gloms onto the receptor in the body, the ACE2 receptor, like that, and then allows for the fatty part of the cell to join against your fatty part of your cells, so that then the virus, which is the RNA of the virus, will go in and start replicating. So there are 3 classes of vaccine I'm going to talk about for coronavirus today. The 2 that are the best likelihood of being one that's around there are a DNA vaccine that is trying to look like that outer spike. So it's pretending to look like the spike so that either the body recognizes the spike and goes after it, or so it'll block that ability. So the one that you may not have heard of that, according to one of my sources that we will put in the links, is the best chance is actually a Chinese vaccine. So the CAR-Sino vaccine, they've already completed a phase 1 trial. They've started a phase 2 trial with 500 people. And this is a DNA vaccine that will recognize the spike protein and will make it so the body can see the spike protein and clobber it. Now, the good things about this mechanism of vaccine, and this is actually the same kind of mechanism that the Oxford vaccine is that it is a vaccine that is, it adapts a regular virus the body's used to seeing. So the regular virus is called adenovirus. It's something we see in the emergency room all the time. It is obnoxious, you see it in the fall, but it's not at all deadly. And it's something that infects the body so easily that by making that part of it inactive and then kind of building a kit to make it look like it's the coronavirus, your body is like, oh, I know how to fight this, and then comes right in. So we probably won't hear anything about the Chinese vaccine until they're either completely done with it or it didn't work. So we don't have the kind of updates and the kind of stock market press releases that we have for American vaccines. But that one's got a good chance of working, and they are well into their phase 2 trial. Now, what is a phase 1 trial versus a phase 2 trial? So phase 1 is a small number of people, like 100, 150, just making sure that the vaccine itself doesn't cause people to get sick. So it's a real safety phase. Phase 2 is looking some at efficacy, but also at side effects. So it's looking and more like a 500-person type trial usually. So that phase 2 is going to see in a bigger group of people if there's some minor side effects that need to be watched for, and can start to where the phase 3 is. And a phase 3 is a much, much bigger trial versus a placebo to see whether or not it actually works. Now, sometimes in a phase 2, you may also be looking at dosing levels. So for example, The Chinese one's looking at a bigger dose in 250 people, a smaller dose in 125, and a placebo in 125. So anyhow, so that is the differences between phases and where we are with the different kinds of vaccines. Now, the reason that you have to have a huge number of people in your efficacy trial is that, first of all, there are still safety things that are being taken into account. Sometimes there are really rare side effects of vaccines, like your body will start attacking your nervous system, and it happens in 1 in a million people, but you start to get a hint if there's a side effect that's going to be a big enough issue that you don't want to give this vaccine to the whole population. The other thing is that to figure out whether something is effective, in human trials, you can't just go in and infect people with the virus and see whether or not it works. That's not ethical. So that means that you have to give a vaccine to a whole lot of people because you're waiting for the chance that some of those people would have been infected, so you can compare the placebo groups and the regular groups. So that's why you need to have such a huge phase 3, and that's what takes up a lot of time, because you have to find those people, enroll those people. Right now there's a lot of ethical debate about whether or not volunteers should be allowed to be infected with the virus, whether the virus should be offered to healthcare workers or to the spouses of healthcare workers first, because they are more likely to be at risk. So there's a lot of unusual things about this landscape. But to get back to where we are with the main thing. So number one is this Chinese company on DNA virus using adenovirus as a vector. Good chance. Oxford is another one, and that is almost the same kind of a mechanism. They're again looking at trying to glom onto the spike protein. They are also in phase 2 now, and the cool thing is that they have been tested in rhesus monkeys, and it is ethical, I suppose. More ethical? I don't know. But you can give vaccines to monkeys and then give them the virus and see what happens. And so in this group of rhesus monkeys, none of them got the virus. So it seems like it was a very effective vaccine, so that's cool. Oxford is the one people have been talking about that says that they can have the vaccine ready by the fall. And that's the one where there are a couple companies that are gearing up to be able to distribute it and make it broadly available. AstraZeneca has just signed on with the Oxford vaccine. So they have distribution channels that would make it really easy to get that. So now there's a different category of vaccine called an RNA virus or an mRNA virus. The good thing about this is that people have been working with mRNA viruses, vaccines, for a long time. The bad thing is none have ever worked in humans. So Moderna is one that is in a phase 2 trial, and Pfizer is also one looking at a different kind of mRNA vaccine, and they have just finished their phase 1 trial and gotten FDA approval for a phase 2. It's not coronavirus. I did my little irrigation not long before we started, so I'm probably a little bit allergic to that. So anyway, so we got Moderna as an mRNA virus and the Pfizer one as an mRNA virus. Pfizer has enlisted a German company to help them. Moderna has a company that begins with an L that I don't remember, Lonzo or something. But so anyhow, the good thing is if any of these 4 make it, 3 of them already have big drug companies lined up to help distribute. So that's good. Now, before we start talking about how to deal with fear of getting vaccinated, let's talk about 2 other vaccines that are interesting in this discussion. So one of them, apropos to my sneezing, is a vaccine that would actually be given into the nose. So this vaccine is one that would make, it's called a VLP, a virus-like particle. So it would cause the immune system to produce things that would then get into the place where the coronavirus tries to attach. So it would block it. So it's like, nope, sorry, already occupied, can't do that. And the nice thing about this, of course, is that it's a nasal vaccine. And so you could just do a little squirt, and since that's where the coronavirus enters, if your immune system occupies all of the ACE2 receptors so the virus can't get in, it's both effective and it could even kick the regular virus off, so it could even be helpful to treat if you've been infected or exposed. That's a cool idea. The other interesting piece of viral news or vaccine news is that there is a vaccine called BCG that used to be given for tuberculosis. And if you've ever seen somebody who has, I don't, I'm right at the edge, but they quit giving it in 71. But if you see a whole bunch of little pokey scars on their arm, that's from a BCG vaccine. And what is fascinating is that people who got the BCG vaccine, those infants have about 50% fewer diseases that cause them to die than kids who didn't get the BCG vaccine. So one of the mechanisms of this BCG vaccine is not just to block tuberculosis, it actually revs up the immune system to protect you against almost any kind of not just virus but also bacteria. So they're looking in countries where the BCG is still given, and they found that younger healthcare workers and young people who have been vaccinated are getting coronavirus and having severe coronavirus about 50 to 90% less than other people. So this kind of gets to this idea that what's going on with the damage of coronavirus is that your immune system is going haywire. It's not completely that the virus itself is hurting you, it's that it's triggering your immune system to act in a really weird way. And so that gives us a lot of different ideas for medicines that work with arthritis and work with your immune system when it's too hyped up. But another kind of interesting part of this is that the problems with asthma and respiratory illnesses that we were expecting to see with coronavirus, we're not seeing. So instead of anything like emphysema or COPD and asthma, early studies from China lumped all of those together in a risk factor. But we're starting to see now that people with asthma actually have lower risk of getting coronavirus and lower risk of having bad disease. So the thought is that the immune system for people with allergies, eczema, and asthma has a very elevated boost in something called IgE. It's one side of the immune fighting system. And because of that, they're probably not going as haywire on the other side of the immune system. So it's not causing the severe illness that we're seeing in other people. All right, look, I know all this is confusing. The immunology is one of the very most complicated subjects in medicine. It has so many checks and balances. It makes our system of government look like a simple Lego pattern. I mean, the strings of going back and forth and moving in and influencing each other with the immune system are so complicated. This is one of the reasons why when people want to debate whether or not a vaccine is safe, it's frustrating for us as physicians, because this is one area where if you trust us in anything else, you should trust us in immunology, because this is something that takes several years to really get your head around. And it's not possible for anyone who's not a PhD in a biologic science to really be able to understand immunology to the extent that the physicians and the doctors who are studying immunology do. It's super complicated. That said, a lot of people who don't want to vaccinate their children, it turns out about half of them are afraid of needles. And this is where we're going to get into, if you are afraid of needles and you want to get a coronavirus vaccine, but you're so afraid you're not sure how you're going to do it, we have been studying this for 15 years and we can help. So it is interesting that the number of people who are afraid of needles has increased over 250% since 1995. The reason we have found out, and this is actually research that we did from our NIH study, is because the number of booster shots that we give when kids are old enough to remember has gone up from giving 6 shots before kids were 2 years old to now we give them 36 separate injections. The thing that matters for getting afraid of needles is if you get 4 or 5 shots on the same day when you're old enough to remember. So this isn't the infant shots at all. This is all like age 4, 5, 6. If you get them all on the same day, then you have about a 50% chance of being severely afraid of needles 5 years later. And you don't have a lot of other needle experiences, so that fear never gets unpacked. It never gets the opportunity to be lowered over time. So here's how you deal with the fear of needles. So first thing is, some of the research that's been done with our devices has found it takes about 3 times of a good experience to reduce your fear by half. So before we have a vaccine, if you're worried that you're going to either faint or not be willing to go get the vaccine, you may want to practice with a toothpick. You may want to get any of the other vaccines that you need, like if you're over 50, get a pneumococcal vaccine. If you haven't gotten your HPV vaccine, if you haven't gotten your hepatitis vaccines, those are good places to practice. So first thing you want to deal with when you're afraid of a vaccine is you want to deal with both the pain and the fear, and then add on a third thing, which is focus. So for pain, we've got the Buzzy device. And this is an ice pack that will freeze solid so that it will transmit the vibration that is the critical part of pain relief. So that is a Lady Buzz, here is a Buzzy. So the first part for pain is wherever you're gonna get your vaccine, put this on for about 30 to 60 seconds. And then when it's time to get the vaccine, you can either attach it with a strap or you can just hold it. And when it's time to get the vaccine, move it up and then do the vaccine there. Now that takes care of between 50 and 80% of the pain. But if you're afraid of needles, you still have to deal with your fear. So one way to decrease fear is to have a plan, and having somebody come with you. Doing deep breathing is a really good way to decrease fear. All the things we talk about for general pain management work for needles also. So taking a huge breath and then slowly blowing it out is actually a good physiologic way to deal with fear. The final thing is focus, and we've spent a lot of time investigating this. So there are now over 50 randomized controlled trials looking at the cold and vibration part for pain, but there are 4 or 5 trials looking at our distraction cards for focus. So what this is doing is there's a question on it, and paying attention while you're getting the shot and answering the question, doing a task, that's something that can decrease pain by 50%. Adding the two of them together decreases pain 88%. So while this is going on and somebody's about to give you a shot, you can have someone holding this up and asking the questions that are on the back. So how many monkeys are touching the bed? Which monkeys are wearing glasses? Which monkey has 3 fingers on one hand? So don't do it before you go there. You don't want to know the answer in advance. But if you've got a buddy, they can ask you questions. If you don't have a buddy and you're still afraid and you need something to focus on, look at a sentence across the room and count how many of the letters have holes in it. I am looking at something that says employee rights under the Family and Medical Leave Act. So while I was getting my vaccine, I would be going, okay, there's a P, O, R, and by then you're done, right? So to review, because it's been a little bit of a long one, there are 4 different vaccines. There are 2 DNA vaccines with adenovirus, 2 mRNA vaccines. They're all on about the same pathway, and 3 of them have really good distribution channels. So it may be that there's a couple different ones that are being offered at once. Next thing is, if you've got asthma, allergies, or eczema, you're probably more protected because a lot of coronavirus is the immune system and it messing up. It's not necessarily your underlying conditions. And if you're afraid of needles, then you need to deal with pain, fear, and focus. I've showed you how to use Buzzy. There are lots of other ways. We've got hours of material on our website. We're actually going to have the Association of Vascular Access. I'm doing a full 1-hour talk on pain techniques for needles for them on Thursday the 14th at 2 o'clock. And I think I've said enough. So it is going to be fine. And please, if you liked what we're doing, sign up for our newsletter, do the little likey thing on YouTube, and by all means, keep tuning in all through the month of May, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 p.m. to hear what's up with coronavirus and to hear about how to deal with pain and good news about what's happening. So I did blow my nose in this, but I'm just going to put it on and say it's going to be fine.